Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell, and today we're going to talk about the 100 most popular books on the New York Times Best Books of the 21st Century So Far list. But we're not going to talk about their list, because I think their list kind of sucked. Their list was created by just like a handful of authors and their normal New York Times book reviewers. It was not based on any like awards or accolades that books have received in the 21st century, and it wasn't any sort of popularity thing. It was literally just like a select few people's favorite books. I didn't like that list. I didn't think it had very representative books on it. But they did a secondary list where they asked readers to choose their own list. And so we're using the Reader's Choice Award or the Reader's Picks of the top 100 books of the 21st century so far. I had a different intro for this video originally where I actually like scrolled through and talked about all of the books on the list and which ones I like wanted to read and didn't want to read, and my opinions on the ones that I had read already. And my intro was like 26 minutes long, and I thought I would spare you all that pain. And so instead, I'm just going to flash up a graphic of the 17 books on the top 100 that I have already read. Most of these books I've actually read in the last two and a half years, maybe 3 years since I started this booktube channel. The ones with the red numbers, I didn't include a rating because I read them so long ago that I honestly am not sure what I would rate them today. And I just have them on this list in the order that they're on the New York Times list, not in my order of how I would order them. But you can see that I did give a ton of these books 5 stars and thought they were fantastic. Pachinko really being the only one on this list I actively did not enjoy. And I would also say Devil in the White City, my memory of that one is a book that was very dry. The content of the story was interesting, but it was just written in a very boring way. I have heard that they are potentially making a movie about this, and I would be extremely interested to watch the movie because the story itself, again, is interesting. The writing itself of the book was not. So anyway, that's kind of a quick overview of the books that I've already read on the list. Be sure to let me know in the comments down below which of the books on the list that you have read, and I'll link the article so you can check through for yourself. But as I said, I've read 17 of them, and I realized as I was going through the list that I actually owned 4 more of the books that were on the list that I have not read, and I decided that would be the premise for this video. So 4 books on the top 100 that I owned and have not read yet. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This is a thriller that I picked up in a Little Free Library last year and is supposed to be like one of the greatest thrillers of all time. The words on the back say ingenious, irresistible, terrifying, razor sharp, sinister, wickedly clever, and menacing. And I did see the Gone Girl movie several years ago, and it was odd, it was interesting, but just because I keep hearing great things about this book, I am determined that I'm gonna read it. It's got like sticker stuff on the front. Anyway, Gone Girl, I believe, if I remember the movie correctly, it's like about a woman who goes missing, and everyone thinks that her husband is the one who kidnapped her or killed her. So very twisty and dark and weird. Will be read in this video. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I've never read anything by Ann Patchett, but I actually just picked this up last month. You might have seen it in my book haul. And I picked this up because my friend Chrissy told me that because I liked City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert, that I would probably like this book too. And then the next one on the list that I own but have not read is 1Q84, 1Q84, Q-Teen 84. I have no idea how to say the name of this, and I have heard all 3 of those different versions said out loud before. So I have no idea what I'm gonna land on here. I think Q-Teen 84 is what I'm gonna stick with for now because this is based off of 1984, the original sci-fi dystopian classic. This is not a retelling or anything like that. It is definitely its own story from what I've heard, but it is a sci-fi dystopian novel and is supposed to be like one of the greatest sci-fi books of the modern era. So I'm very excited to give this a shot, but it is a chunker and I'm very intimidated. And the last one that I owned but have not read is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This one is supposed to be like 3 different timelines, way back in the past in the city of Constantinople, modern era-ish, in Idaho somewhere, and like many years in the future on a spaceship. And somehow these timelines are all connected by a book. I usually like stories like this where there's like different timelines and you like find out as you're going through the book like how they're connected or why they're connected or what the common thread is that ties these things together. Those types of stories aren't always a hit for me, but I always find them intriguing. So this is the TBR for this video, which is quite intimidating. That's a lot. We'll see how it goes. I did go ahead and start this book yesterday because I was planning on getting this video started, and I'm already on page 174, so I'm slightly over halfway through Tom Lake. And this is a story about the summer of 2020. 3 grown women returned to the family farm that they grew up on in order to quarantine with their parents on their farm. The perspective is from the mother of these 3 grown daughters, and it's about her finally telling them the story of a summer that she dated a famous actor before they were born. And he wasn't a famous actor at the time, but he is a famous actor in the current timeline of this book. And the girls have always been obsessed with the fact that their mother dated this famous actor that they all love, and she's never really told them the full story. And so now that they're all quarantining together and they're like working on the farm together, picking cherries, she's finally giving them like the whole scoop. It sounds very uninteresting. I think to me that's the type of plot that doesn't generally appeal, but the story is actually very compelling. I'm having a good time reading it. I think it's interesting it's not focusing on the COVID pandemic-ness of the world. It's definitely mentioned, but there's very little emphasis on that. And it's mostly just about these adult women, I think, coming to terms with the fact that their parents are, fully formed people that had lives before they existed. That's sort of that reckoning that every adult goes through when they reach adulthood and find out that their parents are real people. So I think that perspective on it is really interesting, and I'm enjoying the conversations that are being had. I will probably finish this book today. It's a fast read so far, and I will come back in and let you know what I thought. It's the next day. I did finish Tom Lake yesterday, but it was already dark by the time I finished it, and I decided to wait for better lighting. So I don't really have much more to say about this than I said the first time. I thought this was good, but it wasn't as much as I hoped it would be, I guess. I'm giving this probably around a 3-star. I think it was very bingeable to read. I definitely read it in like a day and a half. The characters were compelling, but there just wasn't as much like meat in the story as I kind of hoped for. There wasn't any real sources of drama. There was like one reveal at the end, but it's just the mother thinking to herself about this event that happened. She decides not to share that event with her daughters, and so there was no like drama that played out from that. The mechanic of the story itself, where the mother is recounting the summer to her daughters about when she dated this actor before he was famous, it only really works because we just have to make a lot of assumptions about why this never came out before. You would think that the daughters would have begged to hear this story back when they were teenagers, not when they're like 20s adults type of thing. And the kind of mechanic they use to play that off is that one of the daughters had a really unhealthy obsession with the actor because she found out that her mom did date him back in the day. She declared when she was a teenager that she thought that actor was actually her real father. And so because of her daughter's unhealthy obsession with the actor, that's why they never really told the full story until now, because they didn't want to add any fuel to that fire that her teenage daughter was feeling. It felt more like a plot mechanic, and the way that the main character was just like, I can't believe the girls want to know all of this juicy details. Why do they care so much? And it's like, well, of course they care. One, like, you're their mom. I feel like every child who likes their parents, at least, wants to know more about their past and what their life was like before they had children. And also, if your mom dated an actor who's like now super famous, like of course you want to know about that story. So I don't know. I just felt like the dynamics of the family felt a little bit like untrue to real life for me in that aspect, and that it was just kind of like for plot reasons. So for that, I'm giving it just 3 stars. But again, I can understand why people really love this. I did enjoy the story overall, for sure. After I finished Tom Lake, I went ahead and picked up Q-Teen-84 last night. And I just want to say, I am so like wowed about the physicality of this hardback book. So this is without the sleeve. I took the sleeve off just to make the reading experience a little easier. But so you have the woman on the front, the man on the back, but the sleeve actually changes the experience of what the book looks like. So you have the missing parts of their faces in the title, but if you put the sleeve back on, then you actually get those parts of their faces and the rest of it is a bit more hidden. So I find that really interesting way to do that. Also, as you're reading the book, it has the Q-Teen-84 on this side, and on this side, it's printed backwards, which I think is really interesting. And then the page numbers themselves kind of float up and down the margins. And so they're never in the same place. So when you kind of flip through the book, it's just a really interesting visual experience that I think kind of adds to the surrealism of the story, which I think is really, really cool. So I just love, like, whoever formatted this hardcover book just did an excellent job. As far as the story itself so far, I am currently, let's see how far I got last night. I read 75 pages out of, oh gosh, 925 pages total. So I'm obviously not very far. At this point, we've met, I believe, the 2 main characters. The woman is named Ayamame. She is some sort of assassin. I haven't figured out exactly what her job is yet, if she's like a FBI agent equivalent but she has, in the first 75 pages, killed someone. The male main character, Tango, is a writer in his free time, and for his job, he is a math teacher. And he is helping comb through some stories that were submitted for a writing contest. He finds one that really, really speaks to him, and so he sends it to the editor, and the editor's like, well, this story is really good, but the writing is trash. So why don't you rewrite the story, because you're a really good writer, and then we can publish it kind of covertly under this girl's name who published it and see if she'll go for that. So he's like conflicted about that, because that's obviously like ethically not a good thing to do. And so he meets with the girl who wrote the story, she's like a 17-year-old in high school. And she tells him that she's fine with that. But she also tells him that this fantasy story she wrote about little people is true, that it's not, she was like, I didn't make that up. The little people are real and you can see them if you want to. And so things are already taking kind of a surrealist turn. As for the woman, Ayamame, the story starts out when she's stuck in traffic on the highway, and she decides, rather than be stuck in this traffic jam for probably the next 2 hours, she's just gonna take this like ladder that goes down from the expressway and get down to the subway to get to where she needs to go. But after she descends the ladder, she starts to notice that things aren't exactly the way that they should be. There's just like a few things here and there that are different than the world that she remembers before she descended the ladder. Like the police uniforms and the guns that they use are different. Sorry if the framing's a little different. My phone storage filled up, so I had to delete some stuff. Okay, I think I was talking about how she started to notice some things are different about the world that she's descended into. And so we're starting to get some hints of the surrealism, but we don't really know what's going on yet. 75 pages in. The one thing that I will say that is really driving me up the wall about this book so far is that this author does not know how to write women. I think you see some memes on the internet every now and then of like, oh, haha, men writing women, and they say like really obnoxious things like, she felt her nipples rubbing up against her shirt as she was walking or whatever. And it's like, that's not how women go through the world. They're not thinking about those things. That's not how women exist. And so there's been a lot of that kind of bullshit so far. Ayamame like just has a moment where she's like descending the ladder, and she like has this like really vivid flashback to a lesbian experience that she had with her when she was 17 with her like other 17-year-old best friend, even though neither of them are actually lesbians, but they like explored each other's bodies, and it like goes into detail about that. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? I had really high hopes of this being like an amazing, like mind-blowing classic type of book, and I still think it has the potential for that, but I am definitely going to say, even with just this short amount that I have read, that it's not going to be a 5-star like I hoped it would be, because there's no way I'm going to give it a 5-star when the women in this book are portrayed so ridiculously. So that's a little disappointing, but again, the story is still really compelling. I'm still excited to find out what is going on and what's going to happen with these two characters. So we'll see. I will update you guys again once I have read a much more significant chunk of this book to let you know how it's going, and I'll see you then. Okay, y'all. I am DNFing Q-Teen84 1Q84, however you say the title of this book. After now being 194 pages into the book, I am just appalled that I have heard so much hype about this book for so many years. I've been looking forward to reading this for so long. And it made the top 100 books of the 21st century. And I gotta say, I do not understand. I don't understand. These are the worst written women characters I have ever read. They literally only think about their boobs and having sex, and they have nothing else going on. It is the most cardboard conversations, the most fake like dialogue that I have ever read. Every time someone talks to each other in this book, woman or no, it's just completely unrealistic to how real people speak. And granted, this could be a translation thing. I know this was translated from Japanese, but I just can't imagine that this is just nothing in here is good. The concepts first introduced in the book about how this woman descends into what seems like a separate reality, right? That was really interesting. And at first she goes to the library and she does a bunch of research and she tries to figure out and make a list of all these things that she notices that are different about this world that she is in now. And then the next like 100 plus pages is just about her sex life. She is unconcerned. She's just going out and banging dudes, and even though she's not lesbian, she's sleeping with other women and comparing her. This is literally the passage that made me on page 195 of this book, where she's in bed with another woman and they're comparing their breast size. And even though they're not lesbians, the one woman like takes out her boob and shows her, and she's like, but don't you think my nipples are too big? It's so ridiculous. It is so awful. I'm just really fed up with it. And every single time that a woman enters the scene in this book, her boobs are described, whether they're big or small or nicely shaped or lopsided. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Also, the man story, Tango was the name of the man. He meets up with this teenager to see if it's okay that he rewrites her story. I think I said that at the beginning. And right away, he noticed how big her boobs are, even though she's a teenager and he's like 29, which is weird. But I was like, okay, I'm sure it's just the way all the writing has been going. I'm sure this is not going to turn into a weird, this man's going to have sex with this teenager type of vibe. Spoilers. I decided just now when I decided that I am DNFing this book, I wanted to figure out what all the freaking hype is about. So I went and read a plot summary on Wikipedia, and if you don't want any spoilers, you can skip ahead. But yeah, it turns out some point later in the book, he does have sex with that teenager. So that's awesome. Wow, I feel like I really have dodged a bullet after reading the plot synopsis, because there is absolutely nothing that makes me think that this would have been worth the next week and a half of my life. I am just astounded that so many people love this book, and I have not felt this strongly about a story in a really long time. I almost want to finish it just so that I can hate on it more vividly. But I'm not, because it's not worth my time, and I have plenty of other good books that I could be reading. Life is too short for that. But holy moly, wow. The formatting of this book and the layout is definitely the best part. I dodged a bullet for sure. Oh, wow. Day, and I have kind of gotten swept away in Cloud Cuckoo Land and decided, oh, I should probably update you guys, because I am over halfway through the book now, and yeah, I think I've read like close to 260 pages already today, and I'm gonna continue reading the rest of the evening. So I don't think I'll finish the book this evening, but I will most likely finish it tomorrow is my guess. So Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr is the same author of All the Light We Cannot See, which is a really popular book that was also on the top 100 list, which is crazy that this author had 2 books on that list. The story so far, we are following several different characters, and in general kind of 3 different timelines, but there's like the timelines jump around a little bit. So 2 of our characters are in the area of Constantinople in the 1400s at some point. Anna is a girl that lives in the city of Constantinople, and the city is about to be under siege. The other character, Omir, is a boy that grows up on a farm and is kind of pulled into the ranks of the army when they're coming through, and they are part of the siege trying to take the city of Constantinople. The girl Anna learns how to read, and she finds a story. It's just kind of like a silly fantasy story about a man who is trying to find a city in the clouds that he heard about in a play that he actually thought was a real city where you can only get to if you have wings. And so he goes on this quest to try and be turned into a bird. And so she finds this story and is really enraptured by it. The next timeline is kind of the modern timeline, and we follow 2 characters there. One is an old man named Zeno, and he is putting on a play of that story that Anna was reading back in Constantinople. It's the man who learns about a city in the clouds and wants to go there, and he has all these silly adventures on the way, and Zeno really likes that story and is putting on a play with these like 5th graders. And at the time that that is happening, a young man walks into the library where he is putting on the play with the 5th graders, and he is planting a bomb in the library, not realizing that him and the children are there. So the other perspective that we get, and this is in the year 2020, is from Seymour, who is the young teenager who is the one that's planting the bomb in the library. And so we get some of his perspective as well, which is really intriguing. And then it goes back in time to Zeno's childhood in the 1950s and also Seymour's childhood in the early 2000s. And we get to know more of their backstories. And at the same time, this bomb is ticking away in the modern timeline. And it just has a lot of tension, like right from the get-go. Then the final timeline is hundreds of years in the future, and it follows a young girl named Constance who lives on a spaceship as they travel to another planet that is supposedly going to be habitable because the Earth is in ruins. Classic sci-fi trope. But when we meet Constance, she is basically alone on the spaceship with the AI that controls the ship, and then it flashes back to her younger days when the ship is full of people, and so you're slowly figuring out what's happening on the ship and what's leading up to the point where she is alone on the ship with the ship interface. All of these stories I think have a lot of tension, and it's really just kind of pulled me through. The writing style is very unique and interesting, and yeah, I've just been having a good time. I don't have a ton of thoughts other than my one real hesitation about this so far is that Seymour, the teenager who is planting the bomb in the library, is our only character that's expressed as kind of neurodivergent, and so the fact that he's also the only villainous character so far is a little bit, I just don't appreciate that representation. This book also does a really good job of making us feel for Seymour and understand kind of where he's coming from with his childhood and upbringing that he had. Zeno, the old man in the modern timeline, also served in the Korean War, and so we get some of his remembrances from being a POW. So there's so much going on, but they're all tied together with this one story. Constance, the girl in the future, is also, her father would tell this story to her as a bedtime story when her father was still around. So they're all tied together by this story of the cloud Cuckoo Land that was written by someone, in ancient Greece, centuries even before Anna, our character in Constantinople, discovers it. So that's basically the premise. We're just following all these different timelines. Like I said, there's a lot of tension because a city is being sacked. There's a bomb in the library. Everyone on the spaceship is dying or dead. There's just a lot of kind of mysteries to uncover here and to find out what happens. And so I'm just having a good time, and I will let you guys know my final thoughts on this once I finish it. Good morning. I almost finished this book yesterday, the day that I last updated you. I read almost 400 pages yesterday, and I think I only had 50 pages when I woke up this morning. So it's not even 9 a.m. and I have finished this book. So this vlog is going much more quickly than I ever anticipated because I thought 1Q84 was gonna take a solid week. And it's only September 3rd now, and I'm already 3 books down on my 4-book vlog. So feeling really good about this. Also, this was lovely. I really, really liked this book. It was just a beautiful story about humanity and the power of stories and redemption. Just the way that this author kind of weaved all of these stories together and the kind of hopeful note that it ended on. I don't really know what all to say about this other than it was a beautiful picture of humanity. There's a lot of environmental messages in this text, and the characters are very affected by the things that are happening to the climate, at least in the modern and future timelines. And I thought that the way that was done was really great. I just really liked this. This is definitely going to be one that I keep on my bookshelves for the future, and I hope that I've inspired you to pick it up. Now we're on to the 4th and final book on my Owned-TBR from the New York Times 100 Most Popular Books. And that is going to be Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. So I'm gonna kick that off today, and I'll check in later. Later, the same day as when I finished Cloud Cuckoo Land this morning, I have read so far about 100 pages of Gone Girl, which means I'm about a quarter of the way through. So far, this is really interesting, very sharply written. I really like this author's kind of like snappy style. It makes everything feel very modern and also just like very fast paced. Our two perspective characters are Nick, the husband, and Amy, the wife. Nick's perspective we're getting in like a current day perspective, and Amy's perspective we're only getting in diary entries from the past, which is really interesting. So the book kicks off, we're in Nick's perspective, and it is their 5-year wedding anniversary, and he hates their wedding anniversary because every year she puts together this elaborate like treasure hunt, scavenger hunt for him, and he can never figure out the clues because she makes them like very specific like inside jokes that you have to like know her and know how she thinks to be able to figure them out. And he just doesn't prioritize and his like he doesn't have the same memory of the events the way that she does, and then she always gets really upset at him that he can't figure out these clues. And so their anniversary, it sounds like, always ends in kind of a big fight or with Amy being mad at Nick. So it's their 5-year anniversary. We're getting flashbacks in, not really flashbacks, but we're reading these diary entries from Amy throughout the years where she first meets Nick. She's like totally obsessed with him. You know, she really, really loves him right from the get-go. So those are getting more and more modern. And then we also have this interesting tidbit about Amy's life where her parents wrote a best-selling children's series called Amazing Amy, and it was based on her. And Amazing Amy was like this staple of children's literature, and there was like 30 different books, and so she comes from a lot of wealth, and everyone kind of knows the character Amazing Amy and grew up with this character, and so everyone knows that she is the person that was based off of, which is an interesting kind of like rich white girl with a lot of privilege sort of backstory, but also like this really weird sort of thing where the character is based on her, but it's also like not her entirely. There's just a few interesting tidbits like that. Nick also has a twin sister that he is very close with named Margot, who he calls Go. Pretty quickly within, I would say, the first couple of chapters at least, Nick gets a call from one of their neighbors saying, hey, your front door is wide open and your cat's outside. Isn't your cat not supposed to be outside? And so he goes home from his work and he walks into the house, and there's like the living room has been trashed, the tea kettle is on and the iron is turned on, but Amy is gone. There's no one in the house. And so he calls the police, and it kicks off this missing persons investigation. Now that we are 100 pages into the books, Amy's parents have flown down to Missouri, I think, where they live, to try and help with the search. And there's tons of police involved. The whole community is trying to get involved. And Nick is very clearly a suspect for the police, because when wives go missing, it is like often the husbands that killed them or whatever. And Nick knows this, but he's just totally like baffled as to what to do, and he feels really awkward. He says he has a very punchable face, and so people just kind of automatically don't like him. And so he like smiles a lot to try and overcompensate for the fact that he has an unpleasant looking face. And that leads to like when the police are questioning him, or like when the press are talking to him, that he's like smiling unconsciously a lot more than he should when they're talking to him about his missing wife, and he's like smiling at inappropriate times just because like it's this ingrained habit he has to be like likable. So he's just making himself look worse and worse because he's an awkward dude. I feel bad for him, but he also seems like kind of a douchebag, so I kind of don't feel bad for him. But I also, like, in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking of like the movie, because I did see the movie years ago, and so I am picturing Ben Affleck, and I can't remember the actress's name right now, but she's really great also. And so I am definitely picturing those two people and like remembering kind of how the movie went down. And so I know it's gonna happen, I think, but this is still keeping me super intrigued, even though I vaguely know the story already. So yeah, having a good time, and I'll update you guys once I have read the last 3/4 of it and let you know my final thoughts. y'all. I just finished Gone Girl, and I'm not gonna lie, I had to put this book down and like pace around the living room talking to my husband and ranting about this book in a good way. This was incredibly entertaining. There is several big twists, which I again kind of knew about because I saw the movie, you know, a decade ago or whenever the movie came out. I don't remember when that was, but the movie was just kind of like unsettling and sinister and weird, and I didn't really think any more about it. I think this is a story that I enjoy much more intensely in book form because of the way that the reveals can happen. But basically, you come to learn that Nick, the husband, is an unreliable narrator, and also that Amy is an unreliable narrator in her diary entries. And so the way that that plays out and the way they play off of each other is just, it just builds so much tension. And when at the beginning, when you kind of think that this is a normal relationship and you see these things that they kind of hate about each other, it really, for me at least, it like made me think of, you know, the worst moments in any relationship where you love someone but they get on your nerves and how you think negative thoughts about that person potentially. But seeing how that for these characters spiraled into the utter psychosis that ended up being this plot was so wild. And these people are so toxic, and it just made me so appreciative to be in a like healthy adult relationship. This was an absolute blast to read. It was so twisty and turny. I really wish that I had not seen the movie before going into this, because then I think it would have been even more jaw-dropping. But even knowing kind of how the plot was going to go, I was still just on the edge of my seat, waiting to see how it was going to play out. So that was a really fun ride, and I had an absolute blast with this. Thrillers aren't normally my go-to, and I think the sun has come out. So let me change angles here, so that we're not directly looking into it. That's way better. Okay, I'm not normally a thriller reader, but I do like to pick up a thriller every once in a while, maybe one or two a year, and this is definitely one that I will be recommending to anyone who ever wants a thriller recommendation. This is just fantastic. So unsettling, so sharp, so well written. The characters are so sharp and so believable and so awful and despicable at the same time. I ate it up. I think I would give this 5 stars. Again, probably would have been a better reading experience if I didn't have the spoilers of having seen the movie, but the book and the movie, it was probably 10 years ago when I saw the movie, so I can't say for sure that I remembered everything, or perhaps there were some things that were slightly different. But yeah, I am kind of wanting to watch the movie again now, having read this, just to see how similar they are and how my memory stacks up to my reading experience of it. But that's for a different time. So I've now done it. I have read the 4 books from the New York Times 100 best/most popular books of the 21st century that I already physically owned. And here they are in order of, I think, my enjoyment. And so now I just want to talk a little bit about why I think these books are on that list and whether they deserved it. And I'm going to say Gone Girl, definitely yes. This deserves to be on the top 100 list. I can see why it's still so popular well over a decade after it was published. It's just a crazy story. It's very well written and it's a good time. Cuckoo Land, absolutely. I don't know if it would be on my personal top 100, but I absolutely loved it and definitely understand why it appeals to so many people and why it would be considered a best. It's very literary, but it covers a lot of topics that I think that sort of crowd find very appealing, and the story was just very beautiful and it was dark but filled with hope. So definitely understand why that one is on the list. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This one I don't think deserves a spot on the top 100 best books of the 21st century. And hear me out. I just don't think this book was very memorable. It was good and I had a good time reading it, but it's like only been a week maybe since I finished reading this book, and I don't even remember the characters' names anymore. I can't really tell you anything that I felt very deeply while reading it. I understand that Ann Patchett is a very popular author and that this was a Reese's Book Club pick at one point, so definitely a ton of people have read this and know about it, and because this author is such a powerhouse, probably a lot of people pick up her books. But I really feel like this might be some sort of recency bias for it appearing on the list. I can't believe there aren't many better books that deserve a place on that list instead of this one. Again, I liked this book and I would recommend it to people, but not in the top 100 for me. And then we have this book, which again, I DNF'd at 195 pages out of 925. I despise this book. I know I ranted to you guys already, so you kind of have a feeling of how I feel about it, but I just cannot imagine why so many people like this. I definitely don't think it deserves a spot on the top 100 books of the year, of the century so far list. This book was utterly disgusting, and not because it was trying to be disgusting or shocking, but just because the author was so sexist and there was some pedophilia and just nasty shit in here that just felt like the author had a hard-on the entire time he was writing it, and it gave me the heebie-jeebies. And I don't think that the quality of the story or the writing in any way made up for that and made it worth continuing to read anyway. As I mentioned, I did go online and read a synopsis of the story to find out what all the hype was about, to see what I was missing, and I don't think that I really missed out on anything by not reading this. So, unpopular opinion, but this book sucks and doesn't deserve a spot on the list. Again, I can't say for sure because I didn't read it, but I will never ever pick up anything by this author again, and I can't believe that he continually makes all kinds of lists of great books. Just wow. So that's it, friends. That's my take on the New York Times Top 100 list. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. That really helps out my channel. And as always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button down below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you next time.